Welcome to Dogsthorpe Infant School Launchpad.
This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure.
Okay, Eddie, start the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
This podcast is brought to you by Eddie Edster, the Dogsthorpe Infant School Wellbeing Dog.
Welcome back to Eddie's Launchpads. It's the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Wherever you're listening in the world, welcome. If you love reading, children or parents, if you love reading to your child, and if you've got a love for animals, whatever those animals might be, have we got a guest for you today? It's a delight to welcome to Eddie's Launchpads, Helen Heraldsen. Thank you for joining us and thank you for being on the show. Now, we're going to get onto your books in a little while, but could you, for the people who've not yet heard of you or your books, could you say a little bit about yourself, where you're from?
Yeah, so my name is Helen. I'm Helen Heraldsen, and I'm also known as the writer in Wellies because I live up in Cumbria in the Lake District, and it generally rains most of the time. And when I'm not inside writing my stories, I am outside. I've got 2 dogs, 3 ducks and 3 horses. So I'm outside with them in the rain and the mud. And if I didn't wear wellies, I'd have webbed feet by now. So yeah, that's me. I'm quite busy. I used to be a teacher. I've been a school teacher in the primary and secondary sort of, age groups. I was an English teacher for 18 years. I have run a school library in 2 different schools. So, basically my career has all been about books in one way or another. Books and children and schools and animals.
Brilliant.
That's me in a sentence.
That's brilliant. And I'm very envious. I've had lots of lovely holidays in Cumbria, and I'm very envious of where you live. We'll be talking about where you get your creativity from, and I think I can guess where some of it must be the beautiful landscape. But what actually first inspired you to pick up a pen and think, do you know, I think I've got there must have been a first book. I think I've got a story within me. What inspired you to write?
Well, quite early on when I was at school, it was books. I used to read books by all these wonderful authors, and it would get me writing. But then I kind of had some strange ideas about authors and things as I was growing up, because I would be reading a brilliant book all of the time and being really impressed by what they were writing. But then I would look at what I had written and think, well, it's not as good as the author. So therefore, I'm not very good at writing. I'm not clever enough to be a writer. And I used to have this idea as well that coming from West Cumbria was the wrong place to come from. I thought you had to be from London or New York, because all of the publishers and everything all seemed to be in London. And as a child, I never, ever met an author. We'd never had an author visit in school. Wow. So, and we didn't get told about, things like editing and how editors work and agents and publishers. So I didn't know that writers got any help. I thought you had to just sit down. It had to come out perfect in the first draft, and you would send it to a publisher, and that was it. So I kind of actually convinced myself as a young person that I couldn't be an author for all those strange reasons. So I became a teacher, because I thought, as a teacher, you'll have to do the dreaded maths, which wasn't my top subject, but I did think you'll get to do lots of literacy and reading and writing and all of that. And when I started to not just read books myself, but when I started to read them as a teacher to children and see the joy that they used to bring to children, and how, they'd be so engrossed, we'd be missing playtime or home time. We suddenly realised we were supposed to be getting shoes on and going out and going home. It just made me think, wow, I wish I could not just be reading these books. I wish I could be producing them as well. And, it just got that kind of dream going again. And eventually, when I got older, I did meet some authors. And when that was the key, really, meeting authors and realizing that they were just ordinary people. um, and they just had a passion for whatever it was that they wrote about. They had a passion. They'd all had rejection. They'd all had lots of problems in getting going. And that kind of gave me permission. And when I thought, right, well, what do I have a passion about? Because now I realize people don't sit down and write a book in 2 weeks. It takes months and months and even years sometimes. You have to have a topic that you love. You can't just write because you think it's what people want. You have to love it as the writer. So I thought, right, well, ponies. Because when I was a young person, I always reading pony books, animal books. I got my parents to let me learn to ride and have riding lessons as a child. And then, when I'd showed that I was committed and I didn't just want to do it when it was sunny and nice, they realised it wasn't just a phase and I was really into it. So they bought me my favourite pony from the riding school where I learned. And I couldn't believe it. It was like Christmas times 10. And I had expected when I got my own pony, every day would be sunshine and fabulousness, and we would just skip through every day having a marvellous time. And then you realise that when you've got a real life animal, it's not always like that, because they're not a teddy bear or a bike that you can just pedal and it goes where you want. They have a brain, they have a personality. My pony Pearl had lots of things that she didn't agree with me about. And I had to learn about how you build a bond with an animal, and you can't boss them about, whether it's a dog or a horse, because obviously a horse is huge and you'll never win a battle of strength. It all has to be about that teamwork and the cooperation, and you have to work with them. You can't tell, you have to ask. And because I had lots of ups and downs and brilliant days and awful days and disappointments, I thought, actually, this would make a brilliant story, because it's not a case of a girl wants a pony, gets a pony, and they live happily ever after, because that's what we want in real life. But in books, we want to see our characters suffer, and we want to see them struggle, and we want to see them change and develop and go through all these problems, and we want to see how they cope with problems. And it was all there. So I didn't really have to use an awful lot of imagination. And I think often children, or just anybody who's thinking about writing a book, they think it has to come from scratch. You have to be J.K. Rowling and be inventing a world and magic and really that's one option, but you don't have to write fantasy stories. A lot of stories can be set very much in the real world. And that's kind of how that's my author brand, I suppose. Everything that I write, there is imagination in there, but everything that I write is very much based on my experiences. And the animals that are in my books are all real. They're all animals that I have had or other people have had, but they're real animals.
That throws up a couple of interesting things that came into my mind as you were speaking. Firstly, how far we've come in regard to education, because like you, I was the same. We were encouraged to write stories, but there was never any authors didn't come into my school, and I was at school a lot earlier than you, and we didn't get authors in, but they tried to harness our imagination, but we didn't get the true encouragement that children get now. And I think that when you were speaking, I thought, well, that's very true, that children have changed and children are more aware now. And I think things like the BBC's competition, that short story competition, I think it helps children to think out of the box. And it isn't about like the Harry Potter, this whole world to create. It is sometimes just about, something mundane, but takes you away on this flight of fancy, and I think that those are very, very, very important. I'm just amazed that you're producing these wonderful books, and yet when you was at school, we're always encouraging our children to creative write and to get them to get a pen in their hand. And we're always pushing them for that and saying, come on, what happens to this character now? You've done this, so what happens to him? Where does he go now? What does he do now? And we're always encouraging him. But when we were at school, we didn't have that, and
Yeah.
And so that's good that you still managed to get it through. You
I do,
found.
and I've been going into schools recently to do some work on like writer identity. What is your writer identity? What do you love to write about? What can you write about? What personal experiences have you got? And some teachers have given me feedback to say that it's unlocked some children because they are in the perception as well that they have to create a character, they have to make one up. And when they're asking them those questions that you just said then about what would the character do, they don't know
No,
what the character would do.
no.
But when you say, well, what would you do?
Yeah.
What would your brother do? What would your dad do? Oh,
Mm.
then they've got some experience to look back on to think, well, what would my brother do? That time when my brother climbed a tree and got stuck and he couldn't get back down, what did I do? And then they realize they've got things they can look at. It doesn't have to come from imagination. It's there.
No.
It's a story. All the stories are there. You just have to look for them.
And it's also interesting when you said about, writers, authors coming from London. You're quite right. I mean, there are a lot of people from London, but Rowling wrote I think she was in Edinburgh. She started Harry Potter books. So there was that.
But again, it's a city,
quite.
I'm just a little small coastal. The only author we were ever introduced to who was from Cumbria at school was Wordsworth. But he was hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
And it was poetry. And then there was Beatrix Potter, but she wasn't actually from Cumbria. She was from London.
No, that's true. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so I think didn't see anyone.
I think the other thing that resonated with me was that thing about we fight if we're writers. We've got a story within us. We often go to the thing that we love the most. And if you think about the great classic writers, and the books, the many books that they have produced, a lot of it is all of it stems from their love for a particular thing. So Conan Doyle's love for medical science is created Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha Christie's love for detective work and investigation. She produced all of that, and it was all about solving this mystery. And Catherine Cookson, all of her love, all of those things is all about, this is what I love writing about. Yeah. And from that becomes this gold or an oil seam from which you can draw all of these wonderful books. And clearly your love of animals is the thing that inspires you.
It is. That is definitely where it comes from. I think if it hadn't been for animals, I'm not sure what else I would have written about. But another thing that's kind of come up now, and when I go into schools, is that children are aware now of AI. And that you can ask, I could put into AI, write me a story about a girl who gets a pony and they have some problems, and it will do it in 2 minutes, and it took me 6 months. So, kids are kind of thinking, well, why do I need to learn to write? Because AI will do it for me. So I always like to say to them but has AI ever been terrified? Has it ever had its heart broken? Has it ever been, excited and thrilled and in love? It's never done anything. And I always say to them that basically what AI is doing is plagiarizing other writers. And that at some point in the near future, I think it will become regulated and it will have to stop. I think it's got brilliant uses in like policing and medicine, but it's not creative. It's a robot. It can't. Authors bring so much of their own, like we say, their passions and their experiences and their personality, and a computer doesn't have any. So I always say to kids, I'm not remotely scared of AI taking over my job. Or if any of you are thinking that you'd like to write and be authors in the future, that job won't be there for you, because I think it will. Yeah.
You can't take out the human factor. I think as much as we might help cut corners. It is about the emotional thing. And talking about the emotional thing, we want to get on to talk about your books, and we will each and every one of them, so that we get to our listeners can hopefully purchase them. With Christmas coming up and all sorts of things like that. So. When you write your books, do your animals in your books talk, or are they interacting as a horse or a dog would normally interact?
So the first series of books that I wrote was the Amber's Ponytail series, and that was my first book. Little Pearl was the first book that I got published. And in that one, it's the girl. She's basically me, but I've called her Amber, and it's her viewpoint. So everything's from her viewpoint, and the horses are, real horses. They don't speak, they don't talk. We don't see their thoughts, we just see their actions. And one of the reasons why I wanted to write that series is because some of the pony books that I read, I just thought they were completely unrealistic. They would show somebody getting this cheap pony who had never done anything, and 2 weeks later they were riding around badminton horse trials and they were winning it or something like that. And it showed nothing of the blood, sweat and tears, the money, the training, the rain, the mud, the years and years that it can take. And I just thought, no, it annoyed me that people who weren't maybe knew about horses would read those books and think that was how it was. So I thought, no, I want to write based on my own experiences and my own ponies. And obviously there are good times, but anyone who has pets will know, and the bigger the pet is, the more the difficulties of looking after them and the problems that you encounter. And it's not just about the ponies either. Obviously, when I had ponies and I went off into the pony club, I met lots of other people. And having been at school and being the only pony person, like nobody else was interested, and I always felt a bit of a loner, a bit sort of not with it, because I was never into what other people were into. But then when I met people who were into the same thing as me, then suddenly, you find your tribe, and it really helps you to develop as a person, because you then sort of have those connections with people who understand. So it looks at the friendships, but with friendships comes jealousies, especially when you're competing, because I was obviously in the world of horse sport. And 1 minute you're with your best friend, and the next minute you're in a class and you're competing against your best friend. So the difficulties of navigating friendships that are also competitive, you're not at the Olympics or anything, but when you're 12 and 13, it's as important, or it feels like that to you. And yeah, just all those sort of things that it was basically my childhood and growing up. And the fact that ponies have been brilliant teachers. They've been as good a teacher as any teacher or any adult or any person I've ever come across, because they've got no words, they can't speak to you. But through what you go through with them, they teach you about perseverance and patience and determination and empathy and all these skills that I think, you can develop through relationships with animals. And that's why I think children who are animal lovers enjoy those books, because they relate to the good bits and the bad bits and the problems, all of those things. They're like, oh, yeah.
That's the reason I asked that question, is because sometimes, not all the time, sometimes I struggle with some of the Disney stuff, because that they put on too much human stuff onto a particular character. Whereas, as you know, with your horses, because I was a farmer and I've worked with horses, and I know if you look into their eyes, you can get, that they're how they are with you, and you can tell by their stance, by the way they stand, by the way they look at you. You can tell if they're in pain. You can tell if they're concerned or worried. You can tell if they're very happy. You can, it's all in the eyes and the facial expressions. And the same is true for dogs. I'm disabled, and so I have to really struggle to come upstairs, because my studio is upstairs. And when Eddie comes up with me, he will not leave me. He walks up the stair in front of me. Now, if he didn't care about what I was doing, he would just fly off, and he would come into his bed where he normally lays, and he wouldn't worry about me. But he stands and watches me, and I look at his face, and I think he's genuinely concerned. Don't fall, and now that's not me putting human traits on him. That's about like you with your horse, that they will do anything for you.
Well, I've just read a brilliant book by Hannah Gold called The Last Bear, which is completely unrealistic, because it's about a girl, meeting a polar bear and having this wonderful friendship with it, which would never happen because it would eat you. But she does say that in the back of the book, don't try to ever make friends with a polar bear. But that's what it's all about. It's about how this girl is able to communicate with the polar bear. Neither of them speak the same language, obviously, but it's all It's all body language.
It is. It is.
That sort of thing. So when I write the doggy books, the dog books are from their point of view. But I'm sort of trying to show with them the sorts of things that dogs worry about. Like you've said, they worry about their owners. They worry about their companions. And what the lengths that they will go to. Because the first book is called The Dalmatian That Lost Its Spots. And I always say to children when I go into schools, is it possible for a Dalmatian to lose its spots? No. But really that's a story about Lucy, the Dalmatian. Her friend goes missing. And she's so worried about her friend and what could have happened to her that when she wakes up in the morning, she's lost all of her spots. And really, it's about how when we're worried, or when we're anxious, or if we're grieving or whatever, we're not fully there. We're not ourselves. A part of us is lost while we're in that sort of state. So although it's not possible, it's a way of showing how stressed and anxious she is about her missing friend. So it's just trying to find ways like that children will be. It's like a physical representation of what's normally just inside. You can't always see if somebody's grieving or stressed or anxious, but if you stop and look and listen closely enough, you will be able to tell. You can't see it as such unless they're crying or something, but they're not there. They're not fully there. So some of the things that are in the books are to help kids with that idea. And then the second book was about dogs getting stolen. And how my dog, Petra, because she's a super duper athletic dog, decides to go to the rescue and that she's going to go and rescue these stolen dogs. And that came from, as I wrote that book during lockdown, I was seeing on the news things about stolen dogs. It was actually happening. People were having their dogs stolen. There was a rise in puppy farms. And then I thought back to one of my favourite books of all time, which is 101 Dalmatians. Obviously, that's about dog theft. And all of that kind of came together to come into a story. And that one is when Petra goes off to look for the dogs, she doesn't just find the 2 dogs she's looking for. She finds that there's a lot more dogs and she has to try and rescue them. But she is super duper athletic. She can jump over a barbed wire fence. She can bash through nettles. She can swim through a lake. But when she meets a pug who can't really go very far because he can't breathe, and all of these other breeds who've got various limitations, she's having to realise, oh, these dogs can't do what I can do. We're going to have to find other ways. So it's kind of about teamwork and cooperation, and that everybody's got a strength. It just might not be the same as you, but it doesn't mean it's not relevant or valid. So there are stories about animals, and people who love animals can read them on that level, but they've also got, something else in there as well.
So what age range are your books aimed at?
So the doggy ones are they're illustrated chapter books, and I would say they're kind of 6 to 9. But obviously it depends on the child and the reading ability.
Absolutely, yeah.
And whether an adult is reading with them or if they're reading independently. The pony books, I tend to say they're 8+, but I've had 6-year-olds who enjoy them because they're reading them with an adult. And then I've had adults who are, 70 getting in touch to say they've loved them as well because they just like ponies. I think if you like ponies and you've had anything to do with them, you recognise some of the things that are going on in there.
Yeah.
Just quite varied.
I'll tell you what, the other thing that came across my mind was that you're doing an important job because I know that lots of children, particularly small children, they see a puppy or they see a rabbit, a pet rabbit, or they see even a pony, and you think, oh yeah, can I have that? Can I have that? And if people are in a position to be able to buy that particular animal for that particular child, that's not, lots of children are quite happy to take a lettuce leaf down to the rabbit hutch after school. But if you try to say, now you've got to clean the rabbit hutch out, I don't want to do it, or an Andrex puppy looks very, very idyllic, but that Andrex puppy doesn't stay an Andrex puppy. It grows into a very, very big dog. So I think what you're doing is, and I guess with your horse as well, because there's that with your ponies. Cleaning tack, going out when it's really wet, cleaning the stable, all of those sorts of things are the sorts of things that will probably make a child or a young person, if they're a little bit older, think, oh, I don't want to do this. But that's the thing about if you choose to have a companion that is an animal. So I think you're doing a fantastic job, Helen. I really do.
Well, that was kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to sugarcoat it and make it seem like it was all going to be pink and perfect and lovely. Another one of the books that was one of the most influential for me was Black Beauty, because that is obviously told from the point of view of the horse, and you get to see what their views are and how they feel exactly the same as us. And it's very important that children realise that animals are brilliant and they give us so much, but they're also a huge responsibility.
They are. But then, funnily enough, we can't do without them, and then it breaks our heart when we do have to say goodbye to them.
I don't feel the responsibility is a chore; it's more of a privilege to have them in your life. But you have got to be prepared. Like me with my horses, I have to go out in the rain and scoop the poop.
Yeah, absolutely,
every day.
Absolutely. So whilst I'm happy to support people, with Disney and the stories that they do, it is a little bit more than that, and that's why I love things like Wallace and Gromit. That with Gromit, it's all about facial expression. You know that Gromit's not happy. You know he's frustrated, and in fact, Mrs. Waters always says she sometimes calls Eddie Gromit, because she says, has Wallace been playing you up, Gromit? Because Eddie looks at her as if to say, oh, he's been a right pain today. Yeah. Which he probably will when he's not had his sausages.
I like to keep the animals as animals, but at the same time showing that they do have personalities, like they are human-like.
Yeah.
But I don't like to make them do things that they wouldn't do,
No, absolutely.
Look and go, that's not
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And there are some. I mean, it's like with horses. Right from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, horses were helping adults, helping families all the time. And they were quite happy to do that. And when I was a shepherd with 2,000 sheep down in Kent, my border collies would do anything for me. And if I left them at home, I was the one that was upsetting them. And all of those animals were all companions. They wanted to please, and like I'm sure you find with your horse and your dogs, it's all that what you do in your stories is so important for children to learn. It's a very important message. So you've got horses. You feature horses in your books and dogs in your books.
Yep.
What?
Yep. So those two feature my own, and then my most recently published book is called Double: The Racing Shetland and Poppy. And I've never met Double, but he's a real pony, and he races with the Shetland Pony Grand National. And his owner got in touch to ask if I'd be interested in writing his story, because it's a very interesting one, full of lots of obstacles and things. And I thought, oh, that'll be fine, because it'll be just like writing my Amber's Ponytails. And I set off writing it, and then discovered that it was actually much harder, because it's a true story, so I couldn't make anything up. But I wasn't there for any of it. I've never met the pony, I've never met any of the characters, and I've never been to any of the places that are featured. But I had to get to know them so that I could write about it, like we said before, with that emotion and, and get all of that across. So the amount of to-ing and fro-ing that I had to go through with the owner, with questions and questions that she must have thought, what is she asking that for? But just trying to get into people's heads and getting to know the personalities. I can't write about a pony if I don't know its personality, because they all have one. You can't just write about them like a block, like an object, like a roll of sellotape or something, because it just won't, the story won't have any sparkle. You've got to get it right. So it actually ended up being a lot harder than I thought, even though it's, again, about real ponies and real people.
Wow. So if people want to get hold of your books, where's the best place for them to go?
And if they want signed copies of my books, they can get in touch with me through my website. So I've got a website, helenheraldsen.co.uk. And then obviously Amazon, other places online. Or, of course, there's independent bookshops. If you go into a bookshop and just request books, they will usually be able to order them. And the same with libraries. If you want to support your local library, if they don't have my books in, usually if you ask, they're quite likely to get them for you.
Brilliant.
lots of ways.
Well, I hope that there's many more stories within you that we'll see in the future. If you do get a new book out, don't forget that Eddie's Launchpads is here for you. And if you want us to promote anything, we're always here. I'll say that.
Book 14 is going to the editor on the 26th of July, so I'm hoping it will be out.
Oh, right.
But maybe by the time this comes out.
Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure that you get back on the show, perhaps in the new year, and we'll get you back on the show, and you can tell us all about that. Folks, don't worry if you didn't get hold of the address or you're worried about spelling. We'll make sure that everything is in the text of this podcast. So wherever you're watching this podcast, double click on the actual thing and you'll see it. Or if you're on YouTube, just scroll down and you'll see all the text there, including a hyperlink that will take you straight to Helen's website. And then you can have a look at the covers of the books. Beautifully illustrated, by the way. Go and have a look, and Helen will be waiting to welcome you onto her website, and you can get hold of the books from there. Helen, thank you for your time today. Long may your excellent work continue.
Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast. Join Captain Dave and his co-pilot Eddie Edster, the well-being dog, on another Launchpad soon. Until then, dream, believe, and shine.